Hello, my name is Salvador Perales, and I am recording this video for my final paper. And I've chosen the topic of the sexual revolution and the church's response. And so I first wanted to talk about, the world we live in today. You know, this world that we live in is a product of the sexual revolution. The sexual revolution was something that helped undermine the church's authority and the morals of Christianity in protecting society. And this all started, in a sense, with the with John Locke. And John Locke, the reason I say that is because he placed an emphasis on the separation of church and state and individual human rights, natural rights. And his ideas were the foundation of the Constitution, and that with no founding of religious belief, the Christian Church, which was the church basically of the founding fathers, even though they were deists, they had a great respect for Christian religion, for the Christian faith. With no foundation of religion, there was no, in a sense, mission or no way to keep the morals of the people kind of in check in order to help protect the people. And as years went on, this foundation that we had of our Constitution, the cracks were starting to be seen. And through that, the sexual revolution began. And it started with, allowing, in a sense, pornography and the morals of the people in seeing marriage, how it needs to be, and professors in colleges wanting to, in a sense, destroy Christian identity because they saw it as something bad. And the Catholics in the US fought back. And what they did was they had a commission, in a sense. And movies had to meet certain standards, or else the Catholics would boycott the movie and tank it. And some could say that at this time, when they were following these rules, that these were the best movies ever made. Because, for one, they were centered around the family, they were centered around Christian ideals, and that they helped, they didn't, show, pornography. They didn't show, moral degeneracy, right? And during all of this, in 1968, one of the, in a sense, prophets of the church, I would say, Pope Paul VI, wrote an encyclical called Humanae Vitae. And here is the first part of it. So, encyclical letter Humanae Vitae of the Supreme Pontiff Paul VI to his venerable brothers, the patriarchs, archbishops, bishops, and other local ordinaries, in peace and communion with the Apostolic See, to the clergy and faithful of the whole Catholic world, and to all men of good will, on the regulation of birth. This encyclical is seen as a prophetic warning to the world at this time. Because as you notice, he wrote it to the whole world. And at this time, really the sexual revolution was picking up in America, right? And one might ask, why did the Pope write this? Well, at the time, the world was going through a rapid increase in population. At least that's why Paul VI said that he wrote this. in his second paragraph, right? And so in order to help with the increasing population, which isn't a bad thing, the increasing of the human family is good. But sometimes, whenever people cannot take care of the kids properly, or people start doing things to undermine the natural creative processes of the human person, that's when we run into issues. And so the new questions that are being arisen during the sexual revolution of transgenderism, of homosexuality being okay, that sexuality is on a spectrum, that pedophilia is okay. That was in the case in France, with a French scientist saying that France should do away with the age of consent. All of these questions about sexuality and how it relates to sex and marriage causes the church to have a deeper reflection on the principles of the moral teachings on marriage, as it says in paragraph 4 of Humanae Vitae. And so, Pope Paul VI says that marriage is far from being the effect of chance or the result of blind evolution of natural forces, which means that God ordained this. This was God's plan, to have marriage between one man and one woman, to help create life in the world, so that we could be cooperating with God in the generation and rearing of new lives, as it says in paragraph 8. And that in paragraph 9 he says it's not merely a question of natural instinct or emotional drive. It is also an act of the free will, whose trust is such that it means not only to survive the joys and sorrows of daily life, but to also grow, so that a husband and a wife become, in a way, one heart and one soul. And together, they attain their human fulfillment. That is what marriage is for, right? And that's why it is so good. It's not just about, sex is not just about the natural instinct and emotional drive, right? It's not about, the testosterone kick that men have. It's not about the estrogen elevations that women have. It's not about that. It's not only about that, right? It's about the deepening of the human relationship and how that helps with the procreation of life. And it helps to show God's glory in that. And that love, which is complete, a person loves their partner for their partner's sake. Not so that, it's not that they love them because, oh, I can have sex with them whenever I want, or, oh, I love them because I have these responsibilities, or because God says so. No, it is a love for their partner's own sake. That is total love. And one thing that the sexual revolution was fighting against was the nuclear family, and that how marriage wasn't permanent. But in the same section, Paul VI says married love is also faithful and exclusive of all other until death. And that's something that we're seeing in the world nowadays, where divorce rates are through the roof, where people aren't even getting married and they're choosing to have children, and those families break up because there is no marriage. There is no, in a sense, protection of the family. And with no marriage, there is no protection of the children, but also there should not be, in a sense, there should not be sex, because there is no, in a sense, giving of oneself to the other, which is what sex is. And I've recently asked some of my friends from college, why is sex so important in a dating relationship when there is no formal, in a sense, there's no formal obligation or no formal commitment to the person, right? Because with dating, you could just leave them and there's no commitment. In engagement, there's a different level of commitment, but there still is not that I'm with you forever. Now, there is an intention to get married, but you could leave them at any time. But with marriage, there is this permanent connection, this permanent and fullness of the connection between two people, which helps to, in a sense, approve sex. Because sex and the conjugal love is what, in a sense, marriage is not about, but is what it's like a prereq for sex, right? Like we have prereqs in college. That's what marriage is. It's a prereq, right? And Paul VI also says that marriage and conjugal love are by their nature ordained towards the procreation and education of children, which means that if if we're baking a cake and we put it in the oven, if we mix the ingredients together, it's batter, but in the end it'll be a cake, right? At the end of the natural processes of cooking, it'll become a cake. It's the same for marriage and the conjugal love, right? If we leave it up to its natural processes, it will move towards the procreation and education of new children. And this is basically where Paul VI says that this is the supreme gift of marriage. This is the biggest blessing that God can bestow on a married couple. And he moves from talking about married love into responsible parenthood. And we can see this in today's world, where there are people having children just to have children, and that there is no way for them to be able to take care of these children. And this is where, basically the single parent household comes into play. This is where single families, right? Or, in a sense, people who are not married but are having children with multiple people, right? And, Pope Paul VI said, with regard to a man's innate drives and emotions, responsible parenthood means that man's reason and will must exert control over the innate drives and emotions. Here he's advocating for self-control. He's advocating for not only man, because in this case he's talking about humans, right? Both men and women, right? The human race. We must learn to control these urges. We must control these drives, the drive that we have to procreate, because it's beautiful, it's natural. But when it's taken outside of the context of marriage and we just give in to these carnal desires, that's when we get into trouble. That's where, people have more kids than they can sustain, or they don't have any kids and they use contraception and they just have sex because it's pleasurable. And so Pope Paul VI says, in a word, the exercise of responsible parenthood requires that a husband and a wife recognize their own duties towards God, their families, and human society, which means that they should see the responsibility that they have with their, in a sense, natural gifts of being able to procreate. And they should, in a sense, recognize that they have to, in a sense, control it and only use it when it's time to help God in his plan. And he even says that we are not free to act as we desire. Because On the contrary, we are bound to ensure that what we do corresponds to the will of God, like I said earlier, right? We don't have we do not have the freedom to do whatever we want with our bodies, which is something that a lot of my peers don't understand. Our bodies are not our own. Like it says, our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, right? I talked to some of my colleagues in college, and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna go." There was actually very recently there was a person that was I was talking to, and they were talking about to the whole like room how they were engaging in sexual activity while driving and engaging in sexual activity in public, and it's just because they could and they felt like they wanted to, and so they did. And there's others that they get many tattoos and they cover their whole body with them. They have body modifications, they pierce everything as if they have full control over their bodies, when in reality they don't. We have to have respect for our bodies as well as bodies of other people, right? Because our will has to match the will of God the Creator. Now, a lot of people think that, sex outside of marriage is good, but the church says it's not. The church says that the sexual activity within marriage is noble and worthy. In paragraph 11 or section 11 of the Humanae Vitae, Pope Paul VI said that in conjunction with the Second Vatican Council, he says that the sexual activity within marriage is noble. Wow, imagine that. It's something to be upheld and worthy, something that gives glory in a sense to God, right? But one thing that he tells us is that the church should always urge men to the observance of the precepts of natural law, which it interprets by its constant doctrine, teaching that each and every marital act must of necessity retain the intrinsic relationship to the procreation of human life, which means that every time a married couple has sex or participates in the conjugal act, that the intention should not be, oh, we're just going to have sex we're not open to life, basically. But here it says that it has to retain that every single time they have sex. So if they are engaging in the conjugal act and they happen to get pregnant, they should be happy about that. They should rejoice. Now, is it something they planned? Maybe not. But it's a blessing from God. Like, for instance, I was, in a sense, unplanned. Or I was unplanned. I asked my mother and father if they had planned for me to be born, and they said no. That I was unplanned. But they were happy and they were joyous whenever they found out that I was coming into the world. And the same case was for my sister. They did not plan to have another kid, but they were open to life. And they said, okay, this is God's gift to us, and so we will take care of the gift and we will do whatever we can to help this gift live. And so that's the beauty of sex, right? Of human life, right? And he then moves to union and procreation, right? Where the marriage act, while uniting the husband and wife in the most closest intimacy, it also gives them the ability to give new life. That's something that in today's world, the church is constantly fighting against, where people are saying, oh, they basically removed sex from life giving. right? They've made sex this, act where it's all only pleasure, when in reality, it's an act that helps to give life. And one of the quote unquote side effects, or one of the consequences of that, it is pleasurable, right? I mean, I wouldn't know, but it is supposed to be. It's supposed to help procreate human life, and the use of marriage fully retains its sense of true mutual love and its ordination to the supreme responsibility of parenthood, to which all humanity is called. Right. So, if we continue to hold the idea that sex is life-giving, if we hold on to that, marriage retains its full sense of true mutual love. But we also have to be faithful to God's design, right? Men rightly observe that a conjugal act imposed on one another partner without regard to his or her condition or personal response and reasonable wishes in the matter is no act of true love. Basically, forcing the conjugal act on your partner, even though your partner doesn't want it, is not true love. Saying to your partner, you will do this with me, you will have sex with me if you truly love me, that's not true love. It should be given out of true love of the person, right? A full giving of self, right? And here is basically where we can have, in a sense, spousal rape, right? Or even just rape in general, right? Not that it wasn't a law before, but more of a sense, this really tells people, hey, this is why this is bad, right? This is why rape is bad. This is why, coercing your partner into sex is bad. Is because of this one right here. Is that we should observe, that men should rightly observe that conjugal act, right? But also, using this divine gift which God has given us and depriving it, even if it's only a little bit, of its purpose and meaning, is equally repugnant to the nature of man and of woman, and is consequently in opposition to the plan of God and his holy will. So basically, even if you, for a moment, make sex and the conjugal act about anything other than life-giving, or anything than what the natural order of it is, you're making it repugnant. You're basically saying, "Oh God, I don't care about your plan and your will. I'm doing what I want to do," and that is because man does not have unlimited dominion over our body, even in general, right? He has no such dominion even over his sexual faculties, right? Because they're given to us by God, right? They're a gift, right? Everything we have in this world is a gift. We have no full control over anything, right? But here is where the prophecy starts, right? Or here where I have 3 gold stars, right? 3 gold stars because this is where the important part is. All of that was leading up to this, in a sense. So, the sexual revolution made it possible for contraception to be everywhere and available to everyone, whether it be in the pill, whether it be in condoms, whether it be in other contraceptive devices, right? Or even sterilization, or even some people use abortion as a contraceptive. The Plan B pill, right? That's a contraceptive, right? That's what the sexual revolution gave us, because it was all about giving the human person liberty over their own body, over their own desires, right? And so here is what Pope Paul VI says to us. We are obligated once more to declare that the direct interruption of the generative processes already begun And above all direct abortion, even for therapeutic reasons, are to be absolutely excluded as lawful means of regulating the number of children, which means all abortion is bad all the time. All of the abortion pills are bad all the time. All Plan B pills are bad all the time. All condoms are bad all the time. All contraceptive devices that can be inserted are bad all the time, even if they're for therapeutic reasons. Birth control is all bad all the time and should be utterly rejected by all Catholics. Similarly, excluded is in any action which either before, at the moment of, or after sexual intercourse is especially intended to prevent procreation, whether as an end or as a means. Which basically means pulling out is bad all the time. You know, taking contraceptive, taking birth control is bad all of the time. Taking Plan B is bad all the time, and using condoms are bad all of the time. Consequently, it is a serious error to think that the whole married life of otherwise normal relations can justify sexual intercourse, which is deliberately contraceptive and so intrinsically wrong. So basically, if you are getting married only to have sex and you're not going to be open to life, and so you do everything in your power to make it to where you can't conceive a child, you are wrong. You're intrinsically wrong. You are basically wrong by your very nature at that point. Yeah. But on the other hand, the Church does not consider at all illicit the use of those therapeutic means necessary to cure bodily diseases, even if a foreseeable impediment to procreation should result therefrom, provided such impediment is not directly intended for any motive whatsoever. So, for instance, if a person has cancer of, let's say, the testicles, right, which is a common cancer that does kill a lot of men. Let's say he goes through chemo and radiation. He cannot produce any more sperm and therefore is rendered sterile. In order to save his life, which is the more important part in a sense here, right? Even though it renders him unable to procreate, the procedure was good because it helped save his life. But this does not give way to abortion. Because some people would probably say, this is the perfect opportunity for us to say that, if the mother's life is in danger, right? But if you remember, it says, above all direct abortion, even for therapeutic reasons, are to be absolutely excluded as lawful means of regulating the number of children. So with that, the Church says that, if you have a disease and the treatment option, if it's the only treatment option you have, and it's the best one for you, if it ends up with you not being able to reproduce, that's okay. As long as the reason for choosing that option is, like, if you choose that option because oh, I'm going to get better, now I can then go have sex whenever I want, not have to worry about producing children. If that's why you chose the option, that's wrong, right? Then you would have to choose a different option. But if the reason is to save your life, then you made the right choice in a sense. Now, one of the ways that the Church has kind of combated the sexual revolution in, basically, free love, everyone can love everyone, we can have sex all the time whenever we want and not have to worry, and we can use contraception all the time, right? in order to combat that, the church came up with natural family planning. Or more, I don't know if the church came up with it, but it was picked up by the Catholic Church. And these next few quotes is where I think we got it from. So it says in section 16, married people may take advantage of the natural cycles imminent in the reproductive system and engage in marital intercourse only during those times that are infertile, thus controlling a birth in a way that does not in the least offend the moral principles. Right? So what does that mean? So basically, if you have kids and you need, in a sense, a break from being pregnant or having kids, you can have sex with your wife, or in a sense, if you're a woman, with your husband, during the infertile periods of a woman's cycle. And you can do this in order to show your love to your partner, right? And that's good. That's fine, right? That's that's not preferable, but it's a good option, right? But it condemns, as always, unlawful the use of means which directly prevent conception, right? So basically, if you abuse the system, that's bad. If you only have sex during the infertile times, that's bad. If you're choosing to have sex and you're marking it, okay, we can have sex between here and here because you're infertile, let's do it. That's bad. You should also have sex during the fertile periods, right? Because that's what sex is for. It's to help reproduce, right? We cannot take away the meaning of, we cannot take away the purpose of sex. And one way I can back this up is the last two sentences of this section, where it says, and when the infertile period recurs, and they use their married intimacy to express their mutual love and to safeguard their fidelity towards one another. In doing this, they certainly give proof to a true and authentic love, which is very beautiful, and it's very, very wholesome. Now, here is where we really get into the prophecy part. Now, it's the section entitled Consequences of Artificial Methods of, in a sense, regulation, population regulation. He basically kind of starts listing things, and I want you to see if you see this in the world today. Marital infidelity, the general lowering of moral standards. Like, both of those are up, right? We now have songs that talk about sex, drugs, and violence. We have movies that have sex scenes and pornography in it. Now, we have, in a sense, on our phones, right here, on our phones, we have the ability to get porn whenever we want. We have the ability to watch graphic shows that, don't help the family. We have shows basically showing two gay men raising a child, which is not a part of our moral standards, right? Paul VI knew that this was going to happen, and that's where he's warning us. And he also said, the young who are so exposed to temptation need incentives to keep the moral law, and it is an evil thing to make it easy for them to break the law. So basically saying, we should protect the children, we should protect the young, and if we do anything to make it easier for them to access pornography, if we encourage them to watch movies that have sex scenes, if we encourage them to do anything that could help lower their moral standards, that's an evil thing for us to do. As Christ said, if he harms these young ones of mine, better for him to not be born, or I think it's the quote is, tie a millstone around his neck and have him cast into the sea. Right? But he also causes men, right? If we grow accustomed to using contraceptive methods, then we will forget the reverence that is due to women. we will start treating them as instruments for our own pleasure and our own desires, which reduces their status in life. And no one wants to be used as an object. But if we continue to use contraception, that's what will happen. And we've already seen that with the porn industry. Most of those people in pornography are trafficked and they're just used, right? That's how we know that, politics was right. What we are allowing, because we are not fighting for our own moral standards, is leading to this. It's leading to the objectification of women. And one thing that we should avoid is to give into the hands of the public authorities the power to intervene in the most personal and intimate responsibility of husband and wife. Now, what does that mean? It means we should not let the government make laws pertaining to our human sexuality, the correct human sexuality, which means the government should not have said that abortion is okay. The government should not have said that contraception is okay. The government should not have said that pornography was okay or that gay marriage is okay, because they're not. They're an affront to true sexuality, an affront to true marriage. And in the next paragraph, since Roe v. Wade was put into law, or was in a sense allowed, right? Abortions were allowed. We have lost so many children, right? And praise God that it was recently overturned, I think 2 years ago, right? After 50 years, it died, right? In a sense, the abortion law got aborted. The irony in that, right? But he said, these limits of man's power expressly imposed because of the reverence due to the whole human organism and its natural functions. Here, Paul VI is basically saying no to abortion again, right? Because, if we place limits on the natural functions of the human body, that's, if we ignore the limits, right, that's where we get into trouble, right? And he's saying here that, these aren't the church saying, oh, we believe these are the laws because we came up with them. No, because it's what God gave us, and it would not be lawful for us to say that something is lawful but is in fact unlawful, since that by its very nature it's always opposed to the true good of the human race. And he even says, there's going to be a lot of people who aren't going to agree with this. He says in paragraph 20, and yet there is no doubt that many it will appear not merely difficult but seem impossible to observe these morals. And he's right. In today's world, I was talking to my colleagues and saying, hey, maybe you should try and not have sex, see how that goes, because you're giving someone something that doesn't belong to them in a sense. I was telling them you should have more respect for yourself, and they said, seems kind of hard to live by, so I'm not going to do it. And so I told them, hey, I am a celibate person. I'm a chaste celibate man. Do you see me going having sex, left, right, left and right, all day, every day? Like, no. Like, so it's not hard. It is hard. Yes, you have to put work into it, but it's not impossible. I said, it really depends on how much respect you have for yourself, on whether or not you follow the laws, the natural laws of the human person. And this is where Pope Paul gives us some of the solutions, right? Where we should have complete self-mastery over ourselves and our emotions. And that self-discipline of this kind is a shining witness to the chastity of a husband and wife. That when they have kids, if their kids see them, having real love and not, inordinate self-love, which is opposite to charity, their children will see that, okay, these are the values I need to have, and will then see they will see their parents dealing with their issues, right? And then the children will have a sincere and harmonious use of their mental and physical powers, right? And we should have a promotion of chastity. We should have a culture of chastity. Pope Paul VI says we should create an atmosphere favorable to the growth of chastity and true liberty, so that may prevail over license and the norms of moral law may be fully safeguarded, right? That everything, therefore, in the modern means of social communication, which arouses men's baser passion and encourages lower moral standards, as well as every obscenity in the written word and every form of indecency on the stage and screen, should be publicly condemned and unanimously by all those who have a heart for the advance of civilization and the safeguard of the outstanding values of the human spirit. And he said it's absolutely absurd to defend that kind of depravity in the name of culture and art, right? So this got me thinking as I'm reading this, I need to get off of Instagram. I need to get off of Facebook. I need to get off of Snapchat. I need to basically stop watching Netflix because there's horrible stuff on Netflix. I need to, in a sense, probably stop watching YouTube. You know, and I'm like, I need to stop going to movies because it encourages lower moral standards, right? Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, all these social medias, like Twitter, right? They have pornography on their platforms, and that helps to the degeneration of moral standards. Not only that, their algorithms actively promote people who choose to live a degenerate lifestyle, right? And so it's important for us as people of faith, of people who want the preservation and advance of our civilization, to say, we need to stop this. And we need to stop, in a sense, parts of the internet, right? Because there's porn on the internet. There's websites that tell people how to commit suicide. There's human trafficking websites. We should, in a sense, maybe even cut off the internet, right? But people would say, oh, this is to protect art and culture. That's a load of bull. That's what Paul VI says. Well, not directly, but he says it's quite absurd to defend this kind of depravity. And so, for me, I was like, wow, Paul VI is calling us to really protect our civilization by promoting good morals and values. And then he goes into, talking to certain people. He talks to scientists, priests, public authorities, to our, our legislators, and he said, we should go for safeguarding the common good and never allow your people to have their morals undermined, and that the family unit should be the unit of the state. And he calls scientists to, pull their resources together to make the world a more favorable, right, to promotion of birth, but also make science more favorable to regulating birth, right, by finding ways of regulating birth without contraception, right, without the chemicals being pumped into bodies, right. Because we still don't know the long-term effects of birth control pills, right? That's something new. This is what Paul VI is calling for Catholic scientists. He even says, I want you to research this. I want you to research the menstrual cycle to help promote the natural family planning. to basically say, hey, the church is right. There are periods where there's infertility, and it's okay to have sex during that time. Is there? We have a duty to help the church, right? And that's what he's trying to tell us here. And even to Christian couples, he says, if someone is coming to your parish and they say, hey, I need help and I need mentoring, it's your responsibility to do that. It's your responsibility to say, hey, we noticed that, I noticed that you have an alarm on your phone for the same time every day, and I noticed you go to the restroom and you take your birth control. As a Christian, as a Catholic, we don't do that. And, you should probably think about getting off of that, right? And for the men, we should talk about masculinity and what it means to be a man, right? Especially in those couples, right? Where it's like, hey, dude, don't coerce your wife into having sex with you. That's horrible. That's not true love. Or, hey, you should protect your family against pornography. You should protect your family against, the degeneracy of the culture, right? That's what Paul VI is calling for Christian couples to do, right? But he's also calling all of us to, in a sense, return to God. If you remember, right now we are in the year of the Eucharist, in a sense, right? We're having Eucharistic congresses, right? Well, here he says, let all of us draw grace and charity from the unfailing fount, which is the Eucharist, which means we should all be going to Mass, right? Every Catholic in the world should be going to Mass. And it's actually shown that people who go to Mass on a regular basis are not in favor of abortion. People who go to Mass on a daily basis are definitely not in favor of abortion. And Catholics who don't go to Mass regularly are in favor of abortion. And so Paul VI is saying, hey, we need to keep Mass attendance up. Even if you don't want to go, go. Because it's a commandment, but also it's good for you, right? And he even says that if we do sin, because we will, that we should have humble recourse to the mercy of God in the sacrament of penance, where he's telling us, go to confession, go and be healed, and then go and sin no more, right? We should take advantage of the sacraments, and that will help us in the cultural war that we are in right now, in the soul for America. And I know you hear that a lot in politics, but this isn't politics. This is real life, in a sense. I say in a sense because politics is just theater, but this is real life, right? So we are in a culture war, and we have to preserve our own culture because it is the culture of the West. It's the correct culture of God. It's the culture which the church promotes. And then he writes to doctors and nurses saying, be ethical. Basically, that's what he's saying. And he also says to strive to win agreements, right? And to support policies among your professional colleagues that help promote what the church is saying. He's telling doctors, don't promote abortion. He's telling nurses, don't promote abortion. And, because married couples will go to you and they have a right to expect good, proper direction, from the doctors, from you doctors and nurses. But he also speaks to the priests, right? Where he's basically saying, priests, you must spell out clearly and completely the church's teaching on marriage. And we must be the first to give an example of that sincere obedience, which is due to the magisterium of the church. And that the church should speak with one voice, which is basically saying, teach that marriage is between one man and one woman, and that marriage is the only place acceptable for sex. And that we should be obedient to the magisterium so that our people can be obedient to the magisterium. And we should have one voice. So if one priest is saying abortion is wrong, contraception is wrong, sex outside of marriage is wrong, but another priest is saying, oh, no, it's okay, as long as you're going to marry the person, or, as long as you're saving the life of the woman. That's two different voices of the church. One is the correct voice and the other is the misleading voice. We need to speak with one and the one correct voice. That's where priests have to have fraternal correction. But we must be patient and abounding in mercy towards sinners, especially towards those who do not, have full faith in the church. They will sin, and we have to be merciful to them because they don't know, in a sense, right? But priests, you should teach your married couples the necessary way of prayer and to prepare them to approach more often with great faith the sacraments of the Eucharist and penance, and let them never lose heart because of their weakness, because that's something that can happen. When we are aware of our weakness, we lose heart and then we sin, right? Our priests need to help protect us from that. He even writes to bishops. He says, for bishops to lead your priests who assist you in the sacred ministry, and to devote yourselves with zeal, all zeal, and without delay to safeguard the holiness of marriage. And he says that the bishops should consider this mission of preserving marriage and safeguarding the holiness of it as their most urgent responsibilities at this present time. Which means there should be bishops yelling from the pulpit, marriage is between one man and one woman, and pornography is wrong, masturbation is wrong, all of these sex shops are wrong, all of the movies that show sex and porn, these are horrible things you should not go to because they distort the marriage act, and they are an affront to God and his will. And he said all of this in 1968, which if you look at today's world and his world were completely different, but he knew what was coming. And so that's why, that is in a sense the church's response, the official response of the church to the sexual revolution. Now, this is an ideal. How has the church responded physically? I would say we haven't. We haven't been able to fight back against the culture, against liberal Marxism. And so we need to do better. It'll be up to my generation and to maybe the generation before me to really fight for this. If anything, we should fight for the morality of the world. We should fight to help the world and to save it. We should promote the nuclear family and fight against homosexuality and fight against pornography and fight against all of these things that are harming our culture. It'll be a hard fight, but I have faith in our God, and I have faith that he will work through us so that we may one day retake the culture and be the America we used to be the strong people that we remember the great generation for being, the ones who defeated Hitler, the ones who stood for civil rights, the ones who stood against Roe v. Wade at the beginning. But that is up to us, this new generation, this pro-life generation, not even pro-life, but whole life, to preserve marriage and to fight against this culture, this throwaway culture, this sex-filled culture, this not sex-filled, but disordered sex-filled culture. May God bless us, and may he keep us, and may he give us the strength to fight back.